5-1, baby, 1-5. No one here gets out alive. You get yours, I'll get mine. We gonna make it, baby, in our prime. You say your mama ain't home, it ain't my concern. Don't play with me, and you won't get burned. I have only one itching desire. Let me stand next to your fire. What I'm saying is, this is what I'm saying. Bet you didn't know I knew how to rock and roll. Don't you know I got the boogie woogie right in my very soul? There ain't no need to be no wallflower. I'm living on blues power. I knew all the time, now I'm gonna let you know. Keep on rocking, if it's fast or slow. Ain't gonna quit till the 25th hour. 'Cause now I'm a living on a blues power. You didn't know I knew how to rock and roll. I'm old, but I can rock. I knew all the time, now I'm gonna let you know. I'm gonna keep on rocking, if it's fast or slow. I don't give a damn. I ain't gonna quit till the 25th hour, you hear me? 'Cause now I'm a living on a blues power. Yeah, 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 yeah. Blues power. Anyway, enough of that. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ear. I've neither come to bury Caesar nor to praise him, okay? Here's what I want you guys to do for me. Like I say, it doesn't cost you anything. It only takes a minute, but it means a whole bunch to me. Hit the like button and hit the subscription button, okay? This is Alligator in Alignment. I'm here today just to tell a couple of stories. I've had these reoccurring conversations, actually for some years now, and it's with older people usually my age or older. And I just had another one recently, so I'm going to break this down for you. I'm doing a thing at a senior retirement home. They had me come over to do a show for the holiday. For whatever the holiday was. And so I'm breaking down my equipment. I've done this show. I'm breaking down my equipment. And this old man is sitting over in the corner. He goes, Alligator, he says, you know some really old songs. And I said, yeah, I go back into the 20s. And when I first started, the top 40 music was the music of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So that was what I learned first. And he said, well, I could probably teach you something about how things was in the old days. And when I hear that, I always smile. And I looked at him and I said, well, excuse me, sir, you could teach me stuff about the old days. He says, yeah, things were different when I came up. When you came up, things were great. You had all of the modern stuff. And when I came up, things were hard. And I said, can I ask you a question, my friend? He goes, yeah. I said, where were you born? He says, Philadelphia. And I laughed. He said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "Okay, I'm gonna ask you a few questions. When you grew up, did you have running water in your home?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Did you have toilets?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Okay, so I can tell you about the old days." And he says, "Well, I'm older than you." I said, "Well, not by much, but I can tell you about the old days." I said, "You didn't live the old days. I lived the old days." I said, "When I grew up, there was no electricity. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have running water. We didn't have indoor toilets. We didn't have any machines to do work. It was mules and horses all day long in the fields, and you did everything by hand." And I said, when we had to go get the day that us kids hated was wash day. Because wash day meant that we had to go all the way back, because we got our water from out of a natural spring off of a place called Reedy Creek out in the woods. So we had to walk, and it wasn't very far, maybe an eighth of a mile or something, down into the woods. And there's this natural spring that people had circled with stones, back in the old days, because to keep the spring contained. We had to take these buckets and go down all the way back into the woods to the spring. And in order to get there, you had to cross this creek. And there was just a narrow board about like that. Two people couldn't cross across it. Now, in the most of the year, it wasn't too much of a problem. But when snow came, and it did snow there occasionally, this was the South. When snow came and you had to go get water, you had to walk across that board, and there was ice on it. So you was always afraid of slipping over into the creek. But anyway, wash day was especially weird because you had to go with these buckets and haul water back to because you had to haul a lot of water for all of the wash. And anyway, it was a rough day. We had no machines. We did everything by horseback. I'm talking to this gentleman, and his mouth is falling open. He goes, "Wow, you did that?" He says, "I only read about that in books, in history books." I said, "Yeah, you're older than me, but you grew up in Philadelphia. I grew up in the backwoods." and the only place you could call the place I grew up was way over yonder. That's it. Then I said, "Let me tell you about my first time that I saw civilization." When I first started school at 6 years old, I was an unusual kid because I had already learned to read. I could read when I got into the first grade. I could already read because the people I was living with, their children, which was like my brothers and sisters, but I was foster kid. They were all ahead of me, and when they were learning, they were going in their first grade, second grade. I was always over their shoulder when they were doing their work. It used to irritate them. I was always over their shoulder watching, and I was learning this stuff myself. So when I got into school, I knew how to read. That was the reason that when I left the first grade, they sent me to the third grade. I didn't go to the second grade, and after the third grade, I went to the fifth grade. I kept skipping because I was way ahead of all the other kids. But the principal of the school and his wife lived in an actual town, maybe 20, 30 miles away. And they liked me for a lot. Well, the husband didn't really like me because I used to irritate him. I was always correcting him in school on stuff that he would say, especially history stuff. I would say, "But Mr. Jones, that's not the way it was." And he would go, "What do you mean? It's here in the book." I said, "I don't care. It's not like that." And because I had read all of these. I was an avid reader even back then. So his wife loved me because she loved the way I irritated her husband. So she asked the people I was living with if they could take me to stay with them for a weekend. And they said yes. So I go into this. We take this long drive, and I had never been out of the backwoods, so I'm just enjoying myself. Look at this, wow, what big houses! And as we got further and further into this town, the town was only about 8 blocks long, but still, it was a town. And we drove into that town, and I was awestruck. There were houses everywhere. Where I grew up at, houses, your neighbors were nowhere near like close to you. And I was just, I was beside myself. So anyway, we go to their house, and it's a house like I've never seen. Beautiful. Everything it was like being in a fantasy world to me. And they were having a cocktail party because they were sort of showing me off. They invited all of their high society, as they were called in that area. They would be high society friends for cocktails, and they were showing me off. And they would say, "Go talk to him. You wouldn't believe what this little boy knows. He always corrects my husband on certain stuff, and that just tickles me." The lady was saying, Miss Jones. So anyway, people are coming over there talking to me, and they're going, "Oh boy, he's really something," And in the middle of the thing, I'm sitting there, and no one's around me for a minute, and I got to go do a number 2, if you know what a number 2 is. So I said, okay, I'm not going to bother anybody. The outhouse is obviously in the backyard, so I go out in the backyard, and I'm looking around, and they got a huge backyard. Just huge backyard. They had 2 or 3 different big oak trees there. And I'm looking around, and I don't see the outhouse. And I have to go really, really bad. Really bad, right? I don't want to shit on myself. So I go do what I do out in the country. If you're out in the country someplace and there's, you're away from the outhouse, you go behind a tree or whatever, and you drop your pants and you do your stuff. And if you don't have anything else, you get leaves off the trees and you wipe yourself clean and you go on your business. So I go around behind the tree, and I'm taking a dump. And Miss Jones asked some of the guests at her party. She says, where did the little guy go? And somebody said, "Oh, he wandered out there in the backyard." And she goes, "In the backyard? What's he doing back there?" So she comes out, and she doesn't see me at all. And she yells my name, and I poke my head from around that tree, and I go, "Yes, Miss Jones?" And she said, "What are you doing behind the tree?" And as she says that, she's walking around to see what I'm doing. And she saw me with my pants down in her backyard taking a dump. And that woman lost it. She screamed like a banshee. "What are you doing? What are you doing? You're taking it in my backyard. What are you doing?" And I don't know why she's so upset. And I said, "Miss Jones, I had to go do a number 2, and I had to go really bad, and I can't find your outhouse." She says, "We don't have outhouses. We have bathrooms. You use the bathroom." And I looked at her, and I said, and I'm thinking to myself, this woman is not too bright. She's like her husband. I said, "Miss Jones, I don't want to take a bath. I need to take a number 2. She says, "Let me get you some toilet paper." She says, "Stay here. I'm going to get you some toilet paper. I'm going to come back. Clean yourself up and come in the house." So she came back. She threw the toilet paper over behind the tree, and I grabbed it. And, cleaned myself up. I pulled my pants up, and she told me, she says, just leave the toilet paper there by the tree. I'll have my husband take care of it later. I said, okay. So I came in the house, and she told her husband, she says, "Gilbert," she says, "take him and show him how to use the bathroom and all of these things." So the first thing he did was he took me over to the sink. And he said, "Okay, now this is where we get our water if we want to have a drink of water, if we want to wash dishes or anything like that. You just turn this thing." And you could have flipped me for a dollar bill. I couldn't believe it. He turned this thing and water came out of it. And I looked at him and I said, "Mr. Jones, how do you do that?" He says, "Oh, he says, that's right. You don't know about any of this stuff." And I go, and he says, come in the bathroom. I'll show you how to use the bathroom." So he goes in there and he says, "Okay, now here's the hot water and here's the cold water. He turned on the cold water. I stuck my finger on it. He turned on the hot water, and I stuck my finger on it, and it wasn't bad. Then after a while, it got hot. And I jumped back, and I was going, how do you get hot water out of this little thing? I said, we have to go and put the water on the stove and heat it up in a big thing, and it's hot. He says, these are modern things. You know? And I just couldn't believe it. Now, the next thing that happened sounds like a joke a comedian would make, because I've heard comedians make jokes about this. But this actually happened. He took me to the commode, and he says, okay, if you're going to do a number 2, you sit here and you do your business, and then when you get through, you push this thing. And he pushed the thing, and the water went whooshing out of there. And this is what I told him. I've heard comedians say this, but this was actually what I told him when I was 6 years old. I looked at him and I said, Mr. Jones, no. He said, what do you mean no? I said, I'm not going to sit down there. I said, my thing hangs down there, and when that water goes, he says, no. It's not going to take your stuff away. He said, trust me. He says, so he says, look, take down your pants and sit down here. So I sat down, and he said, okay, now if you were taking a number 2, just push the thing. And I was scared to death. I said, oh boy, it's going to grab my pecker, and that's it. And I pushed it, and nothing happened. So he took me around and showed me all of the modern things. And then the next morning, he says, would you like to take a shower? And I'm looking at him, and I'm going, a shower? I don't understand. He said, oh, yeah, that's right. He said, come in here. Let me show you the shower. He took me into the shower, and he said, listen, here's the hot water, and here's the cold water. And I'm still can't figure out how the hell did you get hot water out of this little piece of iron thing. Where does the water come from? I mean, somebody must have hauled it up here and poured it someplace, and now they got it coming out of this thing. But how do they keep it hot like that? I'm just, I don't know. So he told me, he says, you get in here, and here's the thing. You turn on the cold water first, and then you turn on the hot water, because if you turn the hot water on, you just might scald yourself. So he turned it on for me, and I took my clothes off, and I got in there. And it was like fantasy world. I couldn't believe it. I'm standing in this thing, and there's water coming all over me, and the water's warm and hot, actually. And I couldn't believe it. It was like standing in a waterfall, inside of a house. I was like, wow. I couldn't believe it. So I'm washing myself. He's standing there watching me to make sure I did everything right. And I'm washing myself, and I'm going through the stuff, and I kept getting underneath it, and I was just so happy to be under this thing. So anyway, that was my first introduction to the civilized world. And I was telling this old man, we go back to the old man I was talking with. I was saying, you don't realize that you grew up in modern times, even though you're older than me. You grew up in modern times. I did not. We were living an 1800s existence back in the 50s, 1800s. When we picked our crops and we had to take them to the market, we put them in a wagon with 2 mules, and we rode to the market where you weigh them and they pay you. I said, everything was done the old ways. We didn't have anything, tractors or anything. There were no tractors back in the backwoods. There were a couple of cars, but they belonged to very rich people. We didn't have stuff like that. And he was just awestruck. He says, wow, you should write a book. And I said, yeah, I attempted that some time back and put it all in a computer, and the computer crashed, and I lost everything. And I had thrown away all of my... No, this was later when I was telling him that. But anyway, when I met him when I was grown. But anyway, that was my first introduction to civilization. And here's a thing that every girlfriend I've had, every any roommates I've had in my life, anybody who was around me, they knew one thing. That shower fascinated me so much that here I am right now, I'm an old man. Every time I get in a shower, I have the same feeling. I'm serious, the same feeling comes over me. I'm fascinated by showers. During the water shortage, I was very aware of saving water. I was very aware of that. And I did everything, I turned off this and I turned off that. I wouldn't let the water run here, there. But when I got in a shower, I didn't care. I take long showers to this day. If I'm at your house and I'm overnight, if I get in your shower and you want to shower, you better shower before me. You hear me? Because I am still as old as I am. Every time I get in the shower, I go right back to my first time. I'm still fascinated by that. When they did bring tractors into the area we were from, where I was working, rather, I was one of the last people still plowing horses and mules in the fields, because I looked at the tractors and did. For some reason, I've always leaned toward the indigenous side of me, and even when I didn't know it. I looked at the tractor and I said, wait a minute, this thing, because a neighbor had one. And I said, this thing is throwing smoke into the air and it's dripping oil in the fields while you're working it. I said, now, that doesn't make sense. I don't want to use that thing. My horses and mules or anything you use, when you plow the fields, if they want to take a dump, they drop their biscuits while they're walking, and you don't care because it fertilizes the soil. So it was, I think I did end up, when I worked for some other ranchers or farmers, I did end up driving tractors when I was working for them. But anyway, let me stop this. But anyway, that was a little insight into me the first time I saw civilization. And to this day, like I say, that feeling has never left me when it comes to showers. I am still fascinated by showers. Don't have me at your house. If you want to take a shower, you better do it before me, because when I get in, I'm in there for a while. Anyway, this is Alligator in Alignment. We'll get back on some other subjects later. I just love these stories. Alligator in Alignment. Happy trails. The second Saturday of every month, Bonton Elroy's Lighthouse Smokehouse is in escrow now. They're having to sell the place. But the new owners, I've heard, have already said that they want me to stay there. It's going to be a Thai place. They want me to stay there and continue entertaining. So I don't know if I'm going to be doing it the second Saturday of next month yet. I'll find out tomorrow. I'm going to take a ride into Monterey, and I'll put up a post if I'm going to be there at the second Saturday of November. Okay, so anyway, let's remember that we need to stop all of this crazy stuff that's going on and start to learning to talk to each other. No matter what side of the aisle we are on, talk to each other. And I don't mean talk over each other or talk at each other. That is no good. If we're going to come to any type of a middle road, we need to talk intelligently, which means saying what you have to say, and then when the other person has a view that they bring in, don't cut across them because you're all revved up on what you think is right. Let them talk. And if you do that, that's the way I like to do. You will find out that both of you will get insights, or even if you don't agree with the person, you'll get to where you can understand how come he or she feels that way. Just through communication. But right now, we aren't talking to each other. We're talking at each other. And that has to stop. Remember, vote yes on 50. I think there's some other states that are Republican states that are doing redistricting, also trying to get more Republican seats. And I wish they wouldn't do that. You know, Gavin Newsom had to do it because of what Texas did, and he told Texas, if you don't redistrict, believe me, I won't. But if you find 5 extra Republican seats in Texas, to counteract that, I'll find 5 extra Democratic seats in California. And people want to criticize him for that, but listen, these guys are playing dirty. You're going to bring a butter knife to a gunfight? You know, anyway, vote yes on 50. That's all I can say. This is Alligator in Alignment. I hope you enjoyed my little interlude about the first time I saw civilization. Alligator in Alignment. I will see you soon.